Hello, welcome to Raymond Castile's Basement of Horror. Today we're going to look at the EMCE Diamond Select Universal Monster series from 10 years ago. I did an episode that's kind of the lost episode of Basement of Horror several weeks ago. I tried to shoot this episode about EMCE, and I shot 2 hours of footage talking about these EMCE monsters. And I just shelved it. It was unusable. It was too much. I couldn't make a program out of it. Too much rambling. And there were technical problems. Some of the footage was unusable. So that is the lost episode of Basement of Horror. It's like London after midnight. No one will ever see it. So now this is my attempt to redo it. And hopefully this time, having gone through it once, I should do much better this time and keep it down to an hour or less, I hope. This should be a 45-minute episode. I hope. Okay, so let's talk about... Well, first let's just, right off the bat, show you one of these things. That is an EMCE Diamond Select Universal Monsters Frankenstein. Good old Frankenstein. And that's one of the first 2 that they released. So we'll get back to him in a second. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this series of Universal Monsters released by EMCE and Diamond Select. Now, Diamond Select already had a series of Universal Monster toys. They were solid PVC, no cloth costumes, very similar to the Sideshow series from a few years before. So similar, in fact, that that's the reason I did not buy the Diamond Select PVC Universal Monsters, because I looked at them and said, well, I've already got this set. Sideshow did it and did it better a few years ago. I don't need to buy this again. They were essentially the same toys, just made over again, only not as good, in my opinion. They were less toyetic and slightly more Todd McFarlane than the Sideshow toys, which I thought had a little more charm, but still had a movie-accurate likeness. They really hit a good balance between being screen accurate and serious, but they still look like toys. Whereas the Diamond Select series, there's something about the aesthetic I didn't like, and they were just too similar to the earlier Sideshow toys. It seemed pointless to me. Like, why do this? It's already been done. I did buy one, and that was the Abbott and Costello Mr. Hyde, which is one of the last ones they put out. That was unique. There had never been an articulated figure of that character before, so I was very interested in getting that character. That was one that I thought Sideshow should have made and never did. But other than that, as of now, I'm sure I'll go back one of these days and buy some of those. But as of now, I've never bought any other Diamond Select Universal Monster PVC figures. So, they already had the Universal license, Diamond Select. Now, EMCE had already been around for a long time, several years, making Mego-style 8-inch figures with cloth costumes. And really, EMCE was one of the pioneers in bringing back the Mego-style, which had been gone since the early 80s. This Mego revival started maybe 15 years ago. And EMCE was one of the companies that was instrumental in bringing back that style of toy to store shelves. The modern Mego that's been around for about 2 years now really is a late comer to that revival of the Mego style. It's really coming along, I think, at the tail end of the revival. Now, I don't know how long the new Mego is going to last, but we've already had over a decade of those kinds of toys available on store shelves or through mail order. And EMCE was one of the companies that spearheaded bringing back that style. So they had all kinds of licensed Mego-style figures before they did the Universal Monsters. They had already been doing that for a few years. EMCE was started by two men, Joe Senna and Paul Clark. Now, you may be familiar with Paul Clark because he's better known to collectors as Dr. Mego, and he is a consultant for the new Mego, the revived modern Mego Corporation. He is officially a consultant. I don't know exactly. He seems to be very involved with the new Mego company, but as far as I know, his title is consultant. So there's a connection there between EMCE and the new Mego. They're not the same company, but there's some shared DNA, if for no other reason than the involvement of Paul Clark, who was instrumental in EMCE and is also very important to the new Mego company. So EMCE had been making various licensed Mego-style figures, and I don't know which is the chicken or the egg in this partnership, if EMCE approached Diamond Select or if Diamond Select approached EMCE, but the two companies formed a partnership to make this toy line. So Diamond had the licensing and the distribution, and EMCE had the experience making Mego-style figures. So EMCE was able to bring that format to Diamond Select, so that besides just their sideshow style PVC figures, they could also offer these Mego style figures. So it's not one company or the other. They really are EMCE, Diamond Select, both companies in partnership made this Universal Monsters toy line. The first two that came out were Frankenstein and Wolfman in 2010. So it's been a decade since these came out. It doesn't seem like it, but it has. And then the next two were, I got some notes here, Mummy and Dracula in 2011. And then Bride of Frankenstein and Creature from the Black Lagoon in 2012. And finally, Phantom of the Opera and the Metaluna Mutant in 2013. So they dribbled these things out, 2 figures a year, from 2010 to 2013. And I remember as a collector being kind of frustrated by that. I mean, that's a long time to wait between figure releases, only 2 a year. And when the first 2 came out, I didn't know if they were going to make any more or not. So I didn't buy the first 2 right away. I waited until the next year when Dracula and Mummy came out. And then I said, okay, so now we got Frankenstein, Wolfman, Dracula, Mummy. Now we got a set. If they don't make any more, they've got these 4, that's good, so now I'll buy them. I remember I wasn't too crazy about the first few in the line, but as the line progressed, they got better and better. And like the Creature and Bride were really good, especially the Creature. And then Phantom and Metaluna Mutant were awfully, awfully good. And Phantom, in fact, I think is one of the best 8-inch figures ever made. And I'm not alone in saying that. A lot of people have expressed that the EMCE Phantom of the Opera, if you're going to talk about like the 10 or 20 best Mego-style figures of all time, would probably be one of them. So they really hit it out of the park with the Phantom. And the Mutant is equally good quality-wise. I mean, it's not as popular of a character, but it's an equally good toy. And Creature is amazing. The way they were able to translate, as you'll see in a moment, the way they were able to translate that character into the Mego-style. I mean, that was a nut that customizers were trying to crack for 40 years. There were so many custom creatures out there, people trying to do a creature in the Mego-style, and no one could quite get it right. And then finally this came out, and they just nailed it. I mean, that was a Mego-style creature all the way. So EMCE still exists, but as far as I know, they don't make Mego-style figures anymore. I think they've moved on to other formats, their toy formats. I don't know if Paul or Joe are still involved or not. I used to know Joe a little bit. I don't know Paul. I mean, I've seen him post on Facebook, but I don't know him personally. Joe, I was an acquaintance of Joe for a while back around this time. And I know this was kind of a passion project of his. I'm sure it was for Paul as well. But I know Joe expressed his excitement about this to me on a few occasions. And he showed me the prototypes. And as you'll see in a minute, the Mummy, and particularly the prototype for that, was very interesting, as we'll talk about that. So I think that's the background. That gives you a good overview of what we're talking about here. So let's get the figures back out. So here's the first two, Frankenstein and Wolfman. These came out in 2010. Frankie and Wolfman. So the Frankenstein, well, I mean, on the one hand, he has the dreaded green jacket, and you know how I feel about that green jacket. I've expressed many times I hate the green jacket. That was something that Universal Licensing Department imposed on Frankenstein merchandise going way back, at least to the early 90s, maybe earlier than that. And it's absurd. Frankenstein had a black jacket in all the movies except Son of Frankenstein. But for some reason, Universal Licensing decided to give him a green jacket. Okay. The other interesting thing about this Frankie is that he's not Boris Karloff, and he's not generic. He's actually Glenn Strange. And that's, as far as I know, there's never been an 8-inch Glenn Strange Frankenstein before. And the only Glenn Strange figure I knew of was a 12-inch one that Sideshow made. I think the Marx figurine, the solid plastic figurine, which if I'd thought of it, I would have it here, but I think that's Glenn Strange. I mean, that doesn't move. It's just a statue, a little plastic statue. As far as I know, there's never been another 8-inch articulated Glenn Strange. So that was kind of special. They made him Glenn Strange instead of Boris Karloff. And from what I understand, that wasn't really an aesthetic choice. That was kind of a necessity that they, for whatever reason, they couldn't do Karloff. Who knows why, but they couldn't. So they did Glenn Strange. But that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool that we got Glenn Strange in this format. And at first, because of the way he's painted, he's very, very toy-like, very doll-like in the way he's painted. He's made of very shiny material. So the Glenn Strange likeness doesn't pop out at first, but when you look at it more carefully, then you really can see in his eyes, in his expression, is definitely Glenn Strange. And it's a nice sculpt. I think if it were painted a little more, with a little more texture, it would really bring out the character in the sculpt. So it's a good sculpt. The paint, it's just kind of shiny. It's a very toy-like paint scheme, which is good. I like what Brian Heiler calls the toyetic look. I like that. I like the toyetic style very much. On this particular one, I wish they'd painted him with a little more texture. And as we'll see as the line goes along, they did start doing that with later ones. His hands are really cool. I like his monster hands. They're really neat. And, you know, his boots and his pants and everything are... He's a nice Frankenstein. He's a little... if he had the black jacket and more textured paint scheme, I think I'd feel a lot more enthusiastic about it. But those aspects just kind of knock it down a little bit. But it's cool. For the first licensed Universal Monsters Frankenstein Mego-style figure since, gosh, I guess we're talking Mego-style, the Remcos in 1980. I guess those were the last time we had a Mego-style articulated licensed Universal Frankenstein. So it was a very welcome addition to the toy shelves, because these were sold in toy stores, at least Toys R Us for sure. They were hanging on the peg hooks at Toys R Us. This wasn't some mail order thing on the internet. You could walk into Toys R Us and see this hanging there. And that, I really like going to the Toys R Us and actually seeing these in a store, being able to buy them at a store. That meant a lot. That was fun doing that. One thing I don't like, these black and white sketches on the front. Now, they changed this later. I don't like the black and white sketches. They later changed those to color, and I think they should have been color right from the start. I don't know why they were black and white. I don't like the look of that. But it's interesting they got Mummy and Dracula pictured right there, even though it would be a year before we'd see those figures. And there's something on the back. Let's wait to talk about the back. Here's Wolfie again. Here's the Wolfman. And this is licensed, obviously they're all licensed Universal, but this is also Chaney Entertainment. So this is supposed to be a Lon Chaney Jr. Wolfman. I have to say, he's my least favorite of the set. I don't think he looks anything like Lon Chaney Jr. It's a very generic looking Wolfman. The sketch on the front, that looks like Lon Chaney Jr. for sure. But I don't think the toy itself looks like Lon Chaney Jr. And the head looks a little small. I like his big, ferocious monster hands. They're maybe a little too big. I like that he has werewolf feet instead of like the new Mego werewolves have sort of 8-man feet. Well, this guy has actual werewolf feet. I like that. I like his costume. He's got a nice belt. They didn't have to go to that length, but they did. They gave him a nice belt with a buckle and everything. Little buttons. The costumes are very well done on these. Very nice. But he's in the paint application with his kind of peach-colored face, and I don't quite like that. So I have to say that the Wolfman is my least favorite of the set. But let's take a look at the back here. So every series of these, every year, they have 2 different monsters on the back. So they always change the back. So this is what it looked like when they first came out. This is the first series, Frankenstein and Wolfman. Now, look at this. Look at that. Isn't that interesting? It has that little bar at the bottom with Marty Abrams, the founder of Mego, and also the CEO of the new Mego as well. It has that same bar, just like the new Mego figures, with the same photo of Marty smiling, and that same bar with the text talking about the history of Mego and what they meant to the toy industry. Just like the new Mego figures, it has that same bar, same thing at the bottom. So this really ties it in, I think, with the new Mego figures. It's not Mego. I know this is not officially Mego, but maybe that's why Mego hasn't made a Universal Monsters series. They've done a couple. I don't know if any of their monsters have been licensed through Universal. I think, like Family Opera, I think it's through Cheney, and Dracula's through Lugosi Estate. Maybe this is why. Maybe they feel like we've been there, we've done that. We already here is our Universal series. This is it. Maybe that's their attitude. Maybe that's why they haven't pursued it. Or maybe, like I said, it was really Diamond that got the license. Maybe maybe these wouldn't have happened without Diamond. There's some obstacles to getting Universal license, but that's another episode. Like why doesn't Mego make the new Mego make licensed Universal monsters? That's a whole other discussion. But it's just so interesting to me that these packages have that same bar across the back. I mean, maybe it takes very little to amuse me. I don't know. But it's very interesting that this Marty Abrams Mego information bar with Marty's photo in the circle is right there, just like it is on the Mego toys. I find that interesting. I might be the only one. All right, we're going to look at those again in a few minutes, but let's continue. Here we have the second series, The Mummy and Count Dracula. And you see that they updated those sketches and made them in color, which I think looks much, much, much nicer. I don't know why they didn't do that the first time. But yeah, it really makes the whole card just pop. I like that a lot. So here's the second series, released in 2011, Mummy and Dracula. So even though they're both Universal licensed, Dracula is not Lugosi. He's not any actor. He's generic. He is a generic Dracula. And even, but for a generic Dracula, he actually looks pretty good, I think. He has a nice costume. His head looks like Dracula. I mean, it doesn't look like Lugosi, but it looks like Dracula. I've seen much worse. In terms of generic Dracula, I've seen much worse. He doesn't look like a Romulan, that's for sure. Like the disco Dracula that Mego put out recently. So, no, he's not Lugosi, but he's pretty cool. And the costume's really nice. His cape's kind of short, but that's okay. One odd thing about his cape is that the collar is red on the underside, so that when it's up, the side facing is black, which is probably how it would be on most real capes if the collar were to lay down. But Dracula has this particular kind of color, so that was an interesting choice to do it that way. This guy's medallion. It's actually like a plastic medallion. He's got a bow tie. It's a very nice costume, and he has human style Mego hands. I am sure his slippers are like the horrible, not horrible, what's it called? The dreadful Dracula, probably like the 70s Mego Dracula. So for a generic non-Lugosi Dracula, he's pretty good. Okay, so let's look at the Mummy. Here's the Mummy. And this is Boris Karloff as the Mummy, even though they couldn't use Karloff as Frankenstein. I guess a year later, they were able to use him for the Mummy. So this is Imhotep. It's not Karis or Caris. And he's got interesting hands, very, very nice detailed monster hands. And he has his ring, like in the movie, on the right hand. His face is a really good Karloff likeness. The Glenn Strange is, it's a decent likeness. Wolfman, I don't know about that one. Dracula isn't supposed to be Lugosi, it's generic. But now you see they've really stepped up their game with this Karloff likeness. That really looks like Boris Karloff as the Mummy. They really nailed it as far as 8-inch format's concerned. That really looks like Karloff. His costume is pretty weird. His bandages, I don't know about that. That doesn't really look like the Mummy in his bandages. I imagine you could customize that and shape that to your liking and make it look better. But as it is, it kind of looks like a scarecrow or something. It's kind of weird looking compared to the Egyptian mummy that Mego put out recently, which has a terrific costume, probably the best 8-inch mummy bandage costume ever done. I'm not as crazy about the Egyptian mummy's head sculpt as some people are. It's okay, but I'm not that wild about it. But the costume is fantastic. That's probably the best 8-inch mummy costume ever. I appreciate what they tried to do with this costume. It's got a little bit of a texture like bandages. I think I would have preferred they just wrapped them up. I understand why they didn't do that. I understand why they didn't want printed bandages. But, it's a nice try, but maybe less would have been more if they had the same idea with these kinds of loose bandages tied up around them, but maybe fewer of them. Well, anyway, still, he's got a great Karloff likeness, so there's that. It's pretty great. Now, here's the back. You see you see Dracula and the Mummy, and the Mummy looks a lot better on the prototype picture. That looks much better. And there's Marty again. You see Marty's still has that information bar about Marty Abrams back there, just like the modern Megos. Very interesting. So now something about this Mummy. So that, I'm assuming that's a prototype, but that's not the only prototype they made. And I've seen in person another prototype. Originally, they made a Karis version of the Mummy, a Lon Chaney Jr. version. And they used the Aurora head on the prototype to make this Lon Chaney Jr. Karis, or Caris, however you want to pronounce it. And I saw that, and I really liked that, and I wish that's what they'd made, and I know that's what they wanted to make. It's not their fault they didn't get to make it. But Universal shot it down and said, nope, you got to do Karloff. And unfortunately, in recent decades, Universal's always been like that. You just can't get a Karis figure out the door at Universal. They just won't allow it. I think the last one that did was Hasbro in their 12-inch line. They did a Karis. But not many other companies have been able to do that. Aurora, their model kit from the 60s is Karis. And A-High, Azrac Hanway, their 8-inch Mummy, and their Ben D2, that was Karis. And their Jiggler, solid rubber Jiggler, was Karis. All the A-High mummies were Karis. But then Remco, their mummies are Imhotep or Boris Karloff. And then Imperial, their mummy is Claris from Raymond Castile, Meet the Mummy. And Placo in the early 90s, it's kind of generic, but I think it's more Imhotep than anything else. Then Sideshow, all their mummies were Imhotep. So, Boris Karloff. So, it's hard to get a Karis Lon Chaney Jr. mummy out the door at Universal. Their licensing department just won't have it. And I was reminded when I talked about the slippers on Dracula. They're the same, I think, as the dreadful Dracula that Mego made in the 70s. And so I neglected to say, Mego proper, in the 70s, made a set of monsters. They made Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, Mummy. But they were all generic. None of them were universal licensed. None of them were actor likenesses. Azraq Hamway International had the license for the universal monsters. Mego did not. And so collectors ever since have been wondering, what would Mego have done if they had made universal monsters? What would they have looked like? If Universal had gotten if Mego had gotten the universal license, what would Mego official Universal monsters look like? Well, I think we have the answer. I think we're looking at them. I think you're looking at them right there. I especially with this creature, I think allowing some difference for the 70s versus 2000s, obviously, but still, I think this is pretty darn close to what we would have got from Mego in the 70s if they had the license for Universal Studios monsters, and the studio had enforced a mandate to make them look as screen accurate as possible. Which, I mean, like Aurora, I think Mego would have done that. I think Mego would have seen Aurora as the competition to beat. Like, that's the standard that kids are used to, and I think they would have made them pretty realistic looking. Now here is the creature from the Black Lagoon. Now this is quite an impressive toy, and that is a Mego creature from the Black Lagoon all the way. And I'm so impressed that they were able to interpret this character and translate it into the Mego aesthetic with a fabric costume and with plastic pieces, and he's got fins on the back, and but he's still Mego, as opposed to this little guy. And I prefer the AI creature, don't get me wrong, but it's not what Mego would have done. This is Azraq Hamway. Mego would have done something like that. I don't think Mego would have done this, but who knows? This is actually from the 70s, and this is not. So this is a little closer to reality than this. But this is AI, and this is more the Mego-style, with a costume. I think Mego would have given him a costume like that. I don't think Mego would have sculpted a body. And this body is really made out of the Aurora model kit. They really used that to make this body. You can tell how they took pieces of the Aurora kit and turned it into this action figure. So this creature, I just like the head and everything just looks correct. He's got the right dimensions. So even the Sideshow creature from the Black Lagoon figures, I feel like Sideshow kind of missed something with the creature. Their creatures always have these sort of boxy looking heads. The shape doesn't look quite right, and whereas this EMCE Diamond creature has this nice, round, fishy-looking head. It has all the right angles and everything. It just looks more like the Gill Man. And I like his big, giant hands, which is screen accurate. I mean, he has big hands in the movie, and a lot of toys and model kits and things have very large hands for the creature from the Black Lagoon. Sometimes people think that doesn't look good, but I think that's what he had in the movie. He had big giant hands like that, and these look very nice. And he's got his his feet look like, they look screen accurate. It's all very well done. And he doesn't look like he's wearing pajamas or something. It all blends together and looks correct. And they gave him a plastic chest piece up here, which makes it look a lot better than if they just had the fabric costume come all the way to the neck. It's much better with that piece hanging down. Well, he's a very cool looking figure. And I can imagine if I'd had him as a kid, this is my childhood AI creature. That is the one I had from childhood. And I played the heck out of him. And I can imagine if I'd had this, he would have gotten quite a workout too. So maybe they would have had a little war. I think he would have won though. Then here's the Bride of Frankenstein. And as usual, I think I've said this before, whenever I say the Bride of Frankenstein, I always want to go, the Bride of Frankenstein. Ding, 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 ding. If you've seen the movie, you know what that's all about. Every time I say the name, I hear that. Here's the Bride. And for the Mego format, she's pretty darn good. And look at her arms. You know how I complained about the mummy's costume? Well, she's got actual, I don't know about the rest of her body, but her arms are actually bandaged like a mummy. And I think that's really what they should have done with the mummy figure. Because this looks pretty good. Her arms look really, really good. They have a nice texture. It's just, if they had the mummy bandaged the same way, I think it would look great. And I don't know if her whole body's bandaged or if it's just her arms. Can't tell. She has a nice white gown. And although the head, it's not an Elsa Lanchester likeness. I don't know if it's supposed to be officially or not, but it doesn't appear to me to be a screen accurate Elsa Lanchester actor likeness. But it's pretty darn good given the format. And really nobody quite gets Elsa right. Even Sideshow, here we go again with Sideshow, their Elsa Lanchester figures are very good, but even they don't quite nail it. No one quite gets her right. And I don't know if they were trying to do an actor likeness with this or not, but it's definitely Elsa on the front. And let's look at that, because I haven't mentioned that the front has changed. So we had the same front with Dracula, Mummy, Frankenstein, Wolfman. The only difference being the first two were in black and white, and the second series put them in color. But now we have different ones here. We have different characters on the front. We have Bride, Creature, Mutant, and Phantom. And it's definitely Elsa on that picture there. Down the back, we have Bride and Creature on the back. And, interestingly, we don't have Marty. Marty has left the building. Marty Abrams is no longer on the bottom of the back of the card. He's gone. Still has a bar there, but doesn't have the same text, and doesn't talk about Marty, doesn't have his face. So that's interesting. But anyway, so even though this face isn't exactly Elsa, it still looks great. And it still really captures the character of the Bride of Frankenstein much better than I would have thought possible with a Mego format figure. I think they did a much better job than I would have expected. I don't know if not so much more than I would have thought possible. I can imagine a better one, but realistically, it exceeded my expectations. I wouldn't expect much out of a Mego format Bride of Frankenstein, but this exceeded my expectations. They really captured the character. If not exact likeness of the actress, they certainly captured the character, and they even have her gray streaks off kilter. They're not symmetrical. They didn't just do them straight back. They did them correct and not quite symmetrical, which is the way it is in the movie. Now, sometimes people make her hair red because her real hair was red. And I guess if you were on the set when they shot it, I probably would have looked red. But I've never thought of the bride's hair as red. I've always thought of it as being darker. Yeah, so I don't know. Either way is fine. Personally, if I were going to paint a model kit, I probably would paint the bride with dark hair, black or dark brown. Even though I know that Elsa had red hair, but it's like the Frankenstein monster's skin, or the color of the lining on Dracula's cape, or color of the creature, or the color of his lips. Are they red? Are they green? All that kind of stuff. These movies are in black and white. You know, they're whatever you want them to be. I don't think they're supposed to be this or supposed to be that. You're supposed to use your imagination. Okay, so now we have the final series that came out. I'm always looking over here at my notes. When did this come out? Oh, yes, there it is. 2013. The final series that came out in 2013. Remember, these are just 2 a year. So we had to wait a whole year between each of these. So here is the Metaluna Mutant and the Phantom of the Opera. And these really are the crowning achievements of the line. These are the 2 best figures in the line. And I expect if they had kept going with other figures, they would have just kept getting better and better and better. But these are something. Look at these. And still the same artwork on the front. Yep. Same artwork on the front. And on the back, now we have Mutant and Phantom. So there's no artwork that has all 8. There's no artwork that has all 8 on the same card, which would have been kind of cool if maybe the final series, but they may not have known this would be the final series. I don't know if they had all 8 lined up or something, but that's not the format they were using. It was each series had 2 characters on the back and 4 on the front. And once again, Marty is still gone. He's not on the back. Well, no, we'll talk about the Phantom in a second. Let's talk about this mutant. Good grief. I mean, this mutant, wow. This is amazing. And because it's not the most popular character, he doesn't get a lot of discussion. But he's every bit as good as the Phantom, really. It's just that the character isn't as iconic. But, wow, they really outdid themselves on this mutant. Again, I would not have thought that you could get this good in the Mego 8-inch format in a mass-produced item. I wouldn't have thought you could do a mutant this good. This is really well done. And I love how the chest isn't just printed, it's layers of this kind of leatherette material. It's layered. All those designs are different layers. And they have little details like that little symbol on his, what I would guess would be his belt. And I like the shoulders. It's kind of like the creature had the plastic piece up top. Some people complain that you can't bend the arms that way, but the character in the movie didn't bend his arms like that. The character in the movie, he kept his arms down and just bent his elbows. I mean, that's how he moved in the movie. Because the costume in the movie also had big shoulder pads like that. He has his little shell on his back. He's really cool. They have that little symbol on his belt. I think I mentioned that. Just lots of little details. Oh, and he's got the veins printed on his costume, which is much like the one in the movie. You don't really know where the costume, the clothing ends and the flesh of the creature begins. Looking at it, you don't know, are you looking at his skin, or are you looking at his pants or his shirt, or what's him, the organism, and what's his clothing or his outfit, it's kind of like the alien. It's sort of like that biomechanoid aesthetic where the living creature and the inorganic parts kind of blend together. Because I think the mutant is supposed to be like an engineered life form that the people of Metaluna created. So I don't think that there were naturally occurring indigenous mutants on the planet. I think they engineered him to be a slave labor force. So who knows if he's maybe even part mechanical or whatever. We really don't know. He looks like he's kind of a part insect, part human, part this, part that. So, and I love how the color of the mutant. I always like to point out with the mutant figures how I love that blue color. If you've got a series of toys, Universal Monsters toys, and there's so much black, and then you have that blue mutant pop out, or you have like the Red Death pop out. I like those characters, the Red Death, the mutant, the bride, the creature. They have those splashes of color. So if you're displaying them, black, gray, but then you have these colorful ones that you can intersperse, and it just looks nice. All right, so here's the Phantom. One of the best 8-inch Mego-style figures ever made. Really superb. They really knocked it out of the park with this figure. And I remember when this came out, it created such a stir among collectors. Everyone was talking about it. They just couldn't believe that anyone made a Phantom that looked this good, let alone people still remembering like the Wolfman or the Frankenstein or Dracula, early ones, whatever you want to say about those, they weren't on this level. So that the same series would rise to this level is pretty impressive. He's awfully nice. I mean, he's got that beautiful haunted look in his face. He just looks he's scary, but he's sympathetic. He's just a creepy, cool, tortured looking Phantom. And you can't really see his costume very well because it's all black, layers of black, but he has a really nice costume. Some people complain that he doesn't have any socks. I think that's going maybe a little beyond the format of the Mego format. So I don't mind that. I think that's part of the Mego aesthetic, that they don't have socks. Socks is something you might find on a 12-inch doll or even beyond that, not on an 8-inch Mego style figure. And these were toys. And that's another thing I like about these, is that as nice as they are, they're still toys. You can play with these. You know, you could give this to a kid if they were interested in these characters, and they could be played with. So they didn't sacrifice the playability and the toy quality and just make a trophy to sit on your shelf and look at. They made them actual toys, and I appreciate that. So he's got his kind of short cloak. It's not really a cape. I guess it's a cape, but it's kind of his sleeves go through it, just like a character in the movie. I mean, everything looks right, but just the best thing about him is that head sculpt. That is just an amazing head sculpt, and with beautiful paint, very textured, artistically done paint that really makes the sculpt stand out and brings it to life. I really like that. Just one more, like a round of applause for this. This is this is an achievement in 8-inch Mego style toys. This is, that is a high water mark. And I know that there's been a lot of great 8-inch figures. Like NECA has made a lot of great stuff after this, most of it though, I should say. I think this is one of the figures that really showed people what could be done in the format if you put your mind to it. I think that this figure might have had some influence on other companies. It set a bar pretty high. So let's look at something else, though. So here is the Mego, the modern Mego, Frankenstein, that was sold at Target. And this came out a couple years ago. Oh, and there's the little bar I'm talking about with Marty. So you might notice that this figure bears quite a resemblance to that figure. And in fact, the heads are practically the same sculpt. When you look at them side by side, it's obvious that the Mego Frank is created from the EMCE Frank. The details are softened, so the Mego one's kind of smoothed out. And the EMCE Frank has the neck electrodes, whereas the Mego one does not. Because the Mego one's not licensed, it's not universal licensed. And it looks like they have the same hands. Yeah, they do. They have the same hands. I don't think they have the same jacket. I don't think anything else is the same on them. But they have... The head sculpt for the Mego is obviously created from the EMCE one. Just with the details kind of softened up a little. And that might just be because of the material that this one's made of. The Mego head is made of different material. Maybe it doesn't hold the detail as well, but I think also deliberately they may have softened up the detail a little bit, and they took the electrodes out. So, and it's not that surprising because Paul Clark is involved with both those lines. Paul Clark was instrumental with EMCE and with the new Mego. And he's listed as a consultant on the back of the Mego Frankenstein. Now here is the, here he is. Here is the Mego Screaming Werewolf. And here is the EMCE Wolfman. Now, a friend of mine said that the Screaming Werewolf head was made from the EMCE Wolfman head, and I didn't believe him at first, because at first glance, they don't look alike. At first glance, I would look at them and think, no, they're not. They're nothing like each other. But looking at them more carefully now, side by side, I see he's right. The Screaming Werewolf has the same ears, same shape, in the same place. It has the same tilt at the same angle. The shape of the mouth and the position of the fangs is the same, and just everything is the same in relation, to the features and everything. And some of the lines in the hair back here on the Screaming Werewolf are the same as the lines on the head of the EMCE Wolfman. So what it appears to me is they took the EMCE Universal Wolfman and they sculpted over the face, particularly up here. It looks like they had a lot of sculpting right in here and just built it up to make the Screaming Werewolf. So he was right. I didn't think he was right at first, but looking at them side by side, he was correct that that the one was made from the other. Now, he also said, my friend, who I won't name, he also said that the new Mego Phantom was made from the EMCE Phantom. In this case, he is mistaken. Comparing them side by side, there's no doubt that they're completely different sculpts. Everything about them is different. The hairline, the mouth, the shape of the mouth, eyes, the brow, they're different. I mean, it's possible that maybe the MC was used as a starting point, but I don't. If it was, and there's so much new sculpt on top of it, doesn't really matter. I don't think it even was, though. I think they're two completely different sculpts. I don't think they have anything in common. And hands are completely different, obviously. There's no commonality there, but the heads are completely different. So he was right about the Wolfman, but not about the Phantom. So that's just an observation that there's some shared DNA between the MC Universal series and the new Megos. It's very clear to me, obviously, that the Frankensteins are very similar, almost identical, and it's very clear to me that the Screaming Werewolf was sculpted over the MC Wolfman. Just looking at it, you can see that if you look at them side by side. So that's just an observation. My friend alerted me to that, and I just found that interesting. Okay, so let's wrap this up. That's our look at the MC Universal Monsters series from 2010 through 2013. I think I brought it in under an hour. Whew. Okay. We have just a couple of episodes before our season finale. I don't know. I'll do probably 2 or 3 more episodes. Then we'll have our season finale, our big season finale. I have an idea of what I'm going to do. We'll see if it comes together. I always like to do something special for this season finale. So hopefully it'll work out. We'll see, and I hope you'll like it. That's it. I hope you enjoyed looking at the MC Universal Monsters toys. They're a wonderful, influential, important set of monster figures. Until next time, he who dies with the most toys is dead.